Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Linda Kugblenu, who is the Vice President, Product Solutions Specialist at JPMorgan Chase Global Payments. How are you doing today, Linda?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm doing fine. Doing fine. First off, I just want to say that title is pretty prestigious.
I worked hard for
And you know what? I'm gonna snap it up for you right there.
it.
I'm glad you said that, right? You had to work hard for it, and it's an honor to have individuals like yourself that are willing to share that story and that journey with us and help our members out. So again, welcome to the show. Thank you for just taking the time to just be here. One of the things that I like to always know right up front is just letting the listeners know a little bit more about your background, cultural background, where you grew up. I think that's probably a great place to start this interview.
Sure. So nice try with the last name there. Like I said, you could be from my village, you know. So my background, I was born in Ghana. I grew up in Accra. I lived in Accra from when I was born till I was about 13. I moved to Harlem, New York in 2006, thereabouts. So I was a teenager in high school. Um, Came from a very conservative background, but also was educated in liberal establishments. And I tend to say that all of that has shaped who I am, right? So my Ghanaian upbringing, my growth in Harlem, going to high school in Harlem, but also living in an African household, but then stepping out into America while living in Harlem. I mean, there are so many different nuances to my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
upbringing, and then attending a liberal arts institution for higher education. So
Mm,
all of that has shaped Linda into who she is today.
mhm, mhm. How did you deal with all of that? I mean, that seems like a lot all at once.
I think growing up and transitioning to the States was definitely very difficult. A lot of immigrants experience this, right? When you move from your home country to a new place, and all of a sudden you have to adapt to several things, right? So from culture to food to music to language. And for me as a teenager in high school, it was just a lot, as you said. It was just a lot at once, but also the expectation from my family was to adjust, adapt, and make it work because being in the United States is a blessing. And that was the messaging that we had as young children. So it was about you didn't even have time to recognize the struggle. It was about just pushing forward because you're lucky to be one of the few that's able to, travel to the States. So that was kind of how it looked like for me growing up.
Was it just yourself, or did you have siblings as well too?
I do. I have two siblings. So I have an older brother and a younger sister. And, you know, I have I have a close bond with both siblings, but especially my younger sister because that trip here was made with her. So she and I traveled together on a flight, on a very gloomy day in Accra. We came together and journeyed to the States together. So
Mm,
yeah,
mm.
it was a very interesting experience for the two of us.
I can only imagine, being like, all right, pack your bags, you're not coming home.
Yeah.
It's time to get out of here. And you're like, well, where are we going? We don't even know what the states look like. We don't even know what the community, the environment.
It's interesting because I had a sense of what it looked like from watching TV. I remember going to a friend's house and her brother had Snoop Dogg images, pictures, and like in his home. And back then it was a big deal to have rappers all over your wall.
Oh
And
yeah, of course.
we also used to watch a lot of music videos growing up, the MTVs and all that. We had access to it back home. So we had exposure to America in that way. You know, you think about the rap videos, you think about the fashion, you think about
Yeah.
all the glitz and glam that you see on TV. That was our exposure as young children. So I had a sense of it, but to actually travel and come into it, I had no idea what to
Mm,
expect.
okay. So now we're in Harlem, right? You're in Harlem. You got this experience going on, education, school. How did your career start, right? And like, what was like some of the early challenges you faced when it came to your career? Like, obviously, education was a part of it as well, but like when you started to get into this career.
So growing up in Harlem, I went to a nearby school. I went to a what do you call it? Like a public high school nearby, and education was interesting. It was about, again, it was a public school. I didn't have access to information in the way that other private students and private schools had. But I had family that encouraged me to learn, do well at school. I mean, it was about performing well. That was the expectation.
Okay.
And I think that really drove my approach to school, my ability to excel in school, and kind of that journey and path to higher education and the kind of school I was able to attend and the scholarships and the opportunities. So I think for me, even though I landed in a public school, which is typically not ideal for a lot of people to, get into certain colleges, I still had that family push, right? That pressure, so to speak, to
Mm,
do really well and perform really well. And so that enabled me to perform well and get into an institution that
okay.
got me to where I got to in terms of work. Well, your second question was about how I got into my work. Was that the
Yes.
question?
How did your that career start off for you?
It was quite the journey, honestly, but I think my career started in college, if I'm being frank. It was the kinds of opportunities that I was exposed to in college. So I went to a very small liberal arts school in Maine.
Oh,
And as a
so
city girl,
Harlem to
that was
Maine.
just right.
You really
It
doing it.
was like from Accra to
Yeah.
Harlem, New York, and then to Lewiston, Maine.
Oh,
It was quite the transition, to be honest. Small school, predominantly white, a handful of Black people. But I was very fortunate to meet a mentor, this woman who worked in our intercultural center. And she took a liking to me immediately because I was very curious. I had a lot of questions about Black identity. I had questions about, what does it mean to be African in this country?
yeah.
Back home, I was Linda, and, there was nothing about being Black, green, or yellow. But you move to the United States, and there are all of these nuances that you have to figure out, like you're categorized and you
Yeah.
you start to think about yourself in buckets. So this woman, she took me under her arm and she would give me books, and beyond that she would also introduce me to fellowships and scholarships that I can apply to,
Okay.
so that I can go to different places to explore topics of interest.
Mm,
And that's where my career began, because when I graduated from college, I carried on with that trajectory. I lived in India. I moved to India right out of college,
right after Maine.
to continue research and work in a new country. So that's how the journey began for me,
Hmm.
from college into the real world.
Okay. So when it came down to college, like you said you were like one of the very few African Americans
Yes.
there. I know that Harlem is like some of a melting pot, right?
Right.
And to go from where you were originally, country, then come into Harlem and at least see like it kind of fitting. You see people that kind of look like you. They might not be from the same area, but they might look like you. How'd you adapt to being in a school or university, even though it was a smaller school, you still could feel overwhelmed by that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was very challenging. Um, it was it was a very prestigious institution. A lot of the students were white. They went to private schools. They came from a certain kind of culture. And I think a lot of it was cultural assimilation for me. You know, when you enter a space where the majority identify a certain way, you tend to find yourself needing to be like them or talk like them or act like them so you can fit in, so you can build community and be happier. And that was very, very challenging. I mean, when you speak to friends of mine from college, they will tell you, "Oh, Linda, we thought you were great. We didn't see you struggle." Why? Because I channeled all that frustration into joining clubs, into
Right.
establishing different programs, into doing these projects that I told you about, traveling every other semester to do some project abroad. But in hindsight, a lot of it was literally that, channeling that energy towards something else. It doesn't mean I wasn't struggling. It was difficult. It was really, really hard.
Mhm, mhm. But I like what you said. Two things in which a lot of our guests have spoken about on the show previously. One is the mentorship. Right off the top, almost I want to say 90% of the individuals that I've ever interviewed here on this platform have always emphasized the fact of having a mentor, especially during those transitional periods, right? And it seems that a lot of those mentors were not mom and dad. It was
Yeah.
somebody else that just believed in them. But that was because they put themselves out there and they cultivated that relationship. So the mentorship, and something that you're hitting on right now, which I feel is very, very important to our listeners, is the fact that you got involved in the university. When you're in that uncomfortable setting, you could easily say, you know what, I'm just going to go to school, go back to my room, school, room. And you probably wouldn't have gotten the same experience. You probably wouldn't have been the Linda that you are today if you didn't take that opportunity to get more involved. And I feel like that is probably sometimes the hardest thing to do when those opportunities are there for you, but it's something that might be crucial in regards to that transition and in regards to helping someone finding themselves, because you could lose yourself in that transition, as you were talking about, talking like the group, moving like them. You lose a little bit of your culture, and I can only imagine coming from where you were, going to Harlem, finding another culture, and now going to Maine and finding another culture,
Oh
right? So
yeah.
a lot of that you might just start pulling away, but I'm glad that you stayed true to yourself and you had that mentor and you just kind of just like stuck it out, because some people it's hard for them. They wouldn't have stuck it out.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I think the natural thing to do for a lot of people when you find yourself in a new space is to just find your little corner or find people who look exactly like you, who identify as you, which is the safest thing to do. And it's important to do, right? Building community that way. But one of the things I did to challenge myself was to really step out of what I knew and understood and to explore these other things and challenge myself. So finding a mentor was actually I didn't find the mentor. She found me. Why? Because I walked into her office and I was asking 1,000 questions, right?
Yeah,
So my
got it. Closed mouths don't get
curiosity,
fed.
right? My curiosity took me to her.
Mm,
Um, and then in terms of my college community, as different as I was from other people on my campus, I put myself out there. I asked questions. I tried to understand where other people came from, and not just uh people of color, but people of other races. My curiosity took me into spaces of discomfort, but I learned
mm,
so much because I just thrusted myself out there.
mm. And when you look at your early childhood and into early adulthood, what was like one of the one lesson that you learned that has kind of stuck with you this whole way through?
Oh, early childhood. I was always a talkative.
Well,
I think
that's why
my
we got you
friends
on the show. That's why we got you. I'm glad you came on.
I think my friends from childhood will say, Linda never shut up. And it wasn't, I didn't just talk to talk. I always see, I would question the why, and people don't
Okay.
like when you question the why.
100%. I
Why
mean,
I was
society.
always curious about the intention behind different things. And and I think that has served me in my adulthood as well, right? Where it's not just about accepting what's thrown at you and given to you. It's about really having that understanding behind the reasoning for why people make certain choices. And I think that has served me really well, even in my career,
Mm,
investigating the why. Why are we doing this? Why is this business move more important than the other? Or even in relationships, why did you decide to, pursue X versus Y?
yeah.
So having that curiosity, that inquisitive mind has really driven me in many aspects of my career and helped me accomplish a lot of my goals and achievements.
But it's very, very, very important to challenge things, when needed. But challenging when you know that you are doing it for the right reasons. There's a lot of people that might challenge it because they're like afraid or they're worried. But you're like, no, I'm just curious because I want to better myself, right? And bettering yourself, it is going to be a little challenge. It's going to be a little pushback. But you figured it out. Now, thinking about it right now, you mentioned Maine, and then right after that, I did catch when you said India, and I know you have traveled a significant amount, a significant amount. So when I think of this next question for you, I'm thinking like when it comes to like your passion to travel, living abroad, in other countries, I know that's kind of shaped you as an individual, but like how has it shaped your views on like the financial world and like giving back to others?
That's a really great question. I think, as someone who grew up in Ghana, who didn't grow up in a wealthy family, and then moving to the United States and, you know, gaining access to very basic resources that weren't necessarily readily available to me growing up. And then traveling outside of the United States and going to places like India and Vietnam and exploring the world from that lens, it's really, really, or it really impacted my perspective on access, who has access, financial access,
Okay.
and how financial access is able to change a person's life. And so, right at the beginning of my career, I centered being able to help provide access to communities of color, people in underrepresented communities, because I noticed the gap. There's a lot of talent and skill here. There's money here, but then there's this huge gap that needed to be filled. And I spent the majority of my career closing that gap and bringing these two pieces together for people. So, to answer your question, traveling, going to different parts of the world, exploring my own privilege, right? Seeing myself in these spaces and seeing how
Yeah,
lucky
let's
I
go.
am, and also recognizing the gaps in all these different spaces and how I can help bridge that has really shaped my career and shaped my perspective on life and pushed me towards doing my best to help wherever possible.
I'm gonna give it to you on the traveling thing. I'm a big traveler, right?
Oh,
In my
good.
previous life, I did a lot of traveling with my job, right? And coming from the South Bronx, having Caribbean parents, one Jamaican and one St. Lucian, we had opportunities to travel. My mother worked in the airlines, but when I got the opportunity to actually travel the world and see
Mm.
it, right, it really did change my perspective on how I want to live my life and how I want my future family to live their lives, right? We're very privileged in certain areas, but there's some areas it's really rough, right? And we
Mhm.
take for granted what we have in front of us. So I think that you've been blessed to have seen the world in so many different ways, right? And I think that the position that you're in right now and the ability to help when it comes down to financing and all this kind of stuff in that industry, I think it's crucial for people of color to understand that industry. And that's why, it brings me to my next question. Like, for the listeners that don't know a lot about your industry and what you do, could you express a little bit more about your current role and how you're helping at JPMorgan Chase?
Yeah, no, sure. So even before I talk about my current role, I do want to preface, and I said it a little bit earlier that, the majority of my career has been centered on, communities of color, underserved communities, and really helping give that or create that financial access for said communities. And that is what drove me to Chase, actually. In During COVID in 2019, I lived in Uganda. I was on a research project with US State Department, and COVID happened. I was there for a completely different project. COVID happened. I had to pivot to this new project, um, working with women entrepreneurs and helping them with
Mm,
funding for their businesses.
nice, nice.
And when COVID happened, most of the women that I worked with, they sold in markets. And because of the lockdown, most of them had to pack their goods and go home. And so they stopped working, their businesses stopped. And myself and a few other researchers essentially got together and created this whole campaign to get these women to get back up with their businesses. And the way we did that was leverage mobile money, which is, I guess, our version of Zelle, Venmo here on the African continent. There's a lot of use of the mobile phone for money exchange, right? So you can send money to friends through your mobile phone. And what we simply did was help create business accounts for these women so that
Okay, good.
even during COVID, they can leverage that device that they're already familiar with to transact and do business. Again, I didn't go to Uganda for that, but I discovered that while I was there. And that really took my experience to the next level and my interest in really wanting to help women and the tech piece, right? The technology piece, in addition, for me was phenomenal. Back in the States, I mean, there was this e-commerce revolution in 2020. Everybody stayed at
Yeah,
home, ordered from Uber Eats,
yeah,
you order
yeah,
your clothes from Amazon,
yeah. You
it's
was
still
good.
there. Right. But in different parts of the world, everything shut down completely. And so being able to work on that project and see these women transact during COVID, it really impacted me heavily. And when I came back to the States, I decided to find a role that would further allow me to do that and impact communities. So that's how I found my role at Chase.
Okay,
Um, so at JP Morgan, I work in cross-border payments. And what that means is sending money from one country to the other where um, the sender and the recipient are based in two different countries. So the money literally has to cross a border. And the way I explain it to people in layman's terms is when you think about remittances, or at least for this community, if you're an immigrant, you send money back home, right? You send money to your parents,
that's
your
right.
family. And so that money movement from the United States to Mexico, United States to Haiti, United States to Ghana, all of that is part of the cross-border payments ecosystem. So that's my world.
Mm-hmm. That was just a common denominator for myself growing back up in the Bronx. Like, we would save money. My father, we sending barrels back home. Your old clothes, your old sneakers, put them in the barrel, and we're gonna ship them out. And I'm like, "Well, what are we doing here? This doesn't make any sense." They're like, "Look, your aunt, your uncle, your cousins back home, they're gonna
They
need
need
this."
it.
And I'm sitting here like, this don't make no sense. They can't just go to Caldors or Walmart and Target. But no, no, no. It was, and that right there, it kept me connected to my culture and my family back home, because it was like mandatory, right? You save a couple dollars during Christmas. Okay, everyone hand money up. We're gonna Western Union.
Right. I was
Western
gonna
Union.
say Western Union,
Woo!
the ultimate. That I feel like every immigrant understands that word.
Yeah, that was
Honestly.
like we were cashing checks,
Yeah.
everything. It was just a spot, but and to I remember going into those Western Unions and seeing nothing but immigrants in there, first and second generation immigrants, and we're all just talking. My mother would be like, here's $100, send it back home to your aunt in Jamaica, and I would meet another Jamaican in there, right?
Yeah.
And just having that type of conversation. So it's beautiful, beautiful, and
Yeah.
I totally catch that.
And
Um,
you know,
but
and to quickly add to that, I think again, back to my foundation of impact in certain communities, this work spoke to me because of the communities it impacted, right? I understand the importance of sending money back home, what it means for a family, being able to pay for school fees, pay for medical supplies, all the things. So for me, being a part of a team that allows me to do that and allows to product and solution for all of these different put together all of these different products that can allow for that facilitation of money movement. Nowadays, it's easy. You have so many apps,
oh yeah, 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 yeah,
there are a plethora of them.
yeah.
But guess what? Almost, if not 100% of those apps are powered by banks. And the majority of them are powered by JP Morgan and Chase. So I feel very empowered to be a part of a team that can allow that movement of money throughout the world.
No more long lines.
Right. No more long. There you go.
Saturday morning was a long line within itself.
Yes.
We
Especially in
had
the Bronx, by the way, because
oh,
we used to
that's
go
where
to
I'm
the
from.
Bronx to send money
Oh,
when I lived in Harlem. Because there are a lot of Ghanaians in the Bronx.
yeah, 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 yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
of Ghanaians in the Bronx,
I would be the line would be out. You would have thought that we were doing ballots for the president, the election,
Right.
in the rain with my umbrella, like, all right, let me just wait until I get inside.
But you needed to, you needed to make it happen.
Yeah, it's a part of that. And something also that I commend you on, right? And you correct me if I'm wrong. I know you know several different languages.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Come on. Oh, yes. Okay. So let the listeners know before we even get into the question, how many languages do you know?
I speak 5 languages. When I was younger, to be honest with you, I would never admit to even knowing anything beyond English.
Mm,
Okay. Because again, moving here as a teenager, the last thing you want to do is establish difference, right? You want
yep.
to be like everybody else. You want to
Yeah.
sound like everybody else. You want to, present as everybody else. So when I was younger, we don't talk about languages at school. It's just English, and we do our best with English. But now that I'm older and as someone who works the kind of career I work in, language is my superpower,
hmm hmm
and I feel so blessed to be able to communicate in different languages, different dialects. I'm still learning, there are a lot of languages in the world that I want to learn. It's all time and time.
Yeah.
um,
That is
but I feel
beautiful.
so blessed to be able to communicate in more than one language, and to connect with different people.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Like to go somewhere and be like, oh, I'm good. Mind you, everyone else is struggling. People looking at books. Nowadays, you got Google or something like that. Or you can just ask Alexa, and it'll right there for you.
The
Um,
best part is when they don't expect you to know the language. That's the best part. When
mm,
you eavesdrop in conversation and you just
mm,
pretend you don't know what's going
mm,
on.
mm. Are you spilling some tea right now?
Right.
Are
Well,
you spilling some tea? Are you trying to spill some tea on the
It's
show
part
right
of
now?
why it's actually part of why I'm determined to learn more, because language is it's a very powerful tool actually. I
Yeah,
think in the United States it's easy to meet people who speak just one language, but to be fair, outside of the States there are a lot of people who speak
speaking
several
several. Yeah,
languages. Yeah,
that's something I realized when I traveled.
exactly.
On average, it was learning two different languages. When I was
Right.
traveling through the Caribbean or traveling through in Europe, at least two different languages. But here in the States, we're like programmed to just learn only English. And because
Yeah,
English is very prominent, it's like there's no need to go the extra step. That's why we got
right.
like the Rosetta Stones and things like that. People trying to do those, or you go to school for it. But in other places, it's like mandatory, right? And
Yeah,
also if it's even if English is not that native tongue for them in a sense, they actually now make it mandatory in their school systems that the students are now speaking English, right?
yeah,
So these students are coming up at least with two different languages versus with us here in the States, it's like from kindergarten all the way to college, we're gonna keep it in this unless you decide to pick a
yeah.
major or something like that versus when
I feel like that is changing quite a bit though. I don't know about the public high schools. I know that when I was in high school, we had the option to learn either Spanish or
oh yeah,
French.
but not at the level of where these other countries are.
Right, right.
There was no like in some of I know some of the previous guests had mentioned in their English speaking classes, like for example, some of them that were Haitian, they were like in their English speaking classes, French was not even utilized.
Hmm.
They couldn't even utter something. Like the teacher wouldn't even respond back. Here in the States, it's different. Oh, you don't know that word? Let me break it down to you, right? There's a difference in the way we're
Yeah,
learning it versus in other countries. It's like, no, don't even ask me that question in English.
right, right.
The discipline, So it's it's a beautiful thing that you do have that. And I could only imagine in your industry, it has helped you over the many years, and it's helped you incline up that ladder to obviously getting that amazing title that you do have.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it it's been a game changer again at work, but also in my experiences and how I relate to people, right? So if you have the ear for different languages, you have the ear for understanding of different people, and different cultures, and you're more inclined to connect with people who are not like you.
True.
So it just goes beyond speaking a different language. It's also allowed me to tap into spaces that I otherwise won't be allowed into, but because I speak a different language and because I can connect with people on another level.
hmm Now, as a thought leader in like payment innovation, right? I want to know like because we were talking about your career, and I want to kind of get an idea. I know some of our listeners are are gonna definitely want to know like what advice would you give to young professionals look aspiring to like make a mark in this field?
Um, I think one of the first things I'll tell young people about, making a mark in any space that they're in, building thought leadership, is to read. I think that mastery over your craft is something no one can take away from you,
Mm,
you know?
mm, mm.
And we're so lucky to be in this day and age where, we have the internet, you have books that are readily available at libraries, Amazon sells books, there are websites that sell used books, there are social media pages that have a ton of information that where you can learn. And so the biggest thing I tell people is you have to establish thought leadership by knowing your stuff. Like when you walk into a space, you have to have ownership of the knowledge. And that's something no one takes away from you, right? So that's
Yeah.
first and foremost. And I think secondly, having the knowledge is one thing, but also sharing that knowledge with people, right? If you know something and you don't talk about it or you don't publicly share it, I don't know you know these things. And so I don't know to come to you for said information. And the way I tell people is you can always leverage social media to put your ideas out there and to establish your knowledge in specific spaces. So LinkedIn for the working people, that's a good medium to share your knowledge.
Yep.
Even the
Yep.
Instagrams and Facebook, they're also very great mediums to put your knowledge out there. So those are the two most important things that I will call out for people who want to establish thought leadership in their in their careers.
Mhm. Now, when you in your profession, like obviously I know your title comes with you spending a significant amount of time in your office, right, or and doing your work. Something that I always need to ask our guests that are at the high level like yourself: how are you managing all of this and spending time with yourself, right? Taking care of yourself, managing that relationships outside of the office, family, and like just like your pursuit of happiness. How are you managing all
I'm exhausted.
that? Come on, clap it up. You kept it real. I would you it wasn't like, I'm doing a real good job, Paul. You cut right to listeners. You hear what's going on here, right? Cut
I'm
right to the chase.
exhausted.
Okay. But you look good. You look
Thank
good.
you. Thank you. No, really, I think it's really hard to manage all of it. I'll be honest, it's not an easy thing to dabble. But I like one thing that one of my favorite thought leaders in the finance space talks about. There's this Black woman called Tasunda Duckett.
Mm,
And, she talks about treating your life and your career like a portfolio, right? A diversified portfolio where, you know, there are some days where you may have to allocate 60% towards your career and maybe 20% towards your husband and your kids, and maybe 10% towards, I don't know, your friendships or your relationships, right? And there are other days where it goes like this, where you have more towards the family, you have more towards, your spin class and your wellness stuff. So looking at life from that lens
mm,
absorbs you of the guilt that comes with feeling like you don't have it all together. And I really, really like her take on that because, oh my God, I mean, there's just so much you have to juggle on a daily basis, and it's exhausting. And you have to really understand that you can't give your all, you can't give 100% to every single aspect of your life at every time. And that's okay.
yeah,
That is
yeah, yeah.
completely
No, no.
okay.
You saying it. You saying it right now. And I think it's important that our listeners hear that because
Yeah.
a lot of them, no matter where they are in their career journey right now, right? They're like, I feel like I'm behind the ball. I'm always got to be moving. I'm always got to be thinking of innovative ways to build something. Some of them like I got to advocate more, right? But there's a something that's beautiful that we should always acknowledge is the journey, right?
Yeah.
Taking our time, having patience, understanding, asking the right questions, finding those mentors that slows you down a little bit, but it slows you down for when it lets go, you fly like an arrow,
Yeah.
right? So we just need to know when and how to utilize that time, use it wisely, right? And I feel like in your journey, you've definitely moved around. That's something that I'm noticing. You moved around, so you didn't get all your answers in one area. You got a
Mm.
lot of answers in different areas, and that's helped mold you into the person that you are. So
Absolutely. It was a journey of confusion, okay? It was now it's all put together beautifully
oh,
on paper. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of I don't know what to do. There was
doubt,
a lot of wait time in
yeah, yeah.
between jobs. There was a lot of just figuring it out. But to your point, having that patience and trusting that journey, I think a lot of people forget, even myself sometimes. When I come across people who have been, I see them with these lavish titles, so I see them, on TV or on stage speaking and, being these wonderful people. We forget that they went through an entire journey to get to where they are. And sometimes that journey can be 20 years to be on stage for like 6 to 10 minutes, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
I think pacing yourself and slowing down and taking things day by day. People hear this and I feel like sometimes it doesn't sink. It's like you really need to chill.
But
You know, you
the
just
portfolio
chill.
thing gives that it that was really good.
Yeah, you
That was
chill
really good.
and you understand that life is a process. And so long as you have ambition, so long as you have drive, motivation, it all comes into place. It all aligns. But trying to get there even before it's time, that just wears you out, really. It wears you out.
Now, it seems that you got a lot of energy in you, right? And so I want to know about, finding this career coaching business. On top of all the things we were just talking about, you were like, Paul, I'm running around. It's stressful, right? You add more things to the table, more things to the plate. Talk to us
Yes.
a little bit more about this because I know it's very successful and you're helping
Yes, yes,
individuals.
yes. So career coaching for me, so I recently founded a coaching business called Foreign at Work, and it's it's a personal thing for me where as a foreigner at work, I didn't have the tools, guidance, the resources that I have now when I was starting out. Like I said, a lot of my journey was a bit directionless in terms of where I wanted to go with my career. But over the years, I've managed to get to where I want to get to. I have received a lot of awards in my industry for the work that I do. I've been very successful in my career, and I just want to make it easier for someone else who's
Mm,
embarking on the same journey. What does it mean to understand the cultural nuance in corporate America? There are people who walk into the corporate space and they have no idea how to navigate it. I want to make it easier for people because I understand how painful that experience can be when you feel like, when you feel foreign
yeah.
in the corporate space. So it's a very, again, personal thing for me because I want to support people like myself who come from backgrounds like mine, to thrive and succeed in the corporate space and to achieve their goals. So that's why I put extra energy
We don't know where
into
you get it.
doing this.
The energizer money over here. We don't know where you get it, but you get it.
I try.
But it's all for good things. It's
Yes,
not like you're just adding things to the table that have no meaning and no purpose, right?
right.
You're adding more value to yourself, but also to your community, right? And that has traveled with
Absolutely.
you from your childhood even to where you are right now currently. So it's hard to not help. It's hard to not add value because you know the purpose in adding value. And there's a lot of individuals, like you said, they don't have the resources and the tools that you have. They're fighting to get it. They don't even know where to find it. They don't even know where to start. You could easily give them 30 minutes of your time, and that could change someone's life. Just like this interview right here. The listeners listening right now, a lot of gems that you have dropped this interview time period are really gonna make someone be like, maybe I need to start questioning. Maybe I need to be more of an advocate. Maybe I should have taken that job position where it helped me travel around the world. Right? I was nervous to do it, but I'm hearing what Linda's saying, and I think I need to lean into it. So you're saying a lot of great things tonight. I just want to add to that.
I
You're
appreciate that.
coaching on this Zaka platform right now as we speak.
I appreciate that.
You,
And
you,
I do want to add real quickly that it's part of why I am very supportive of Zaka and what it's about and what it represents, similar to what I do in my career coaching. I know Zaka is all about the first and second generation immigrant and supporting that. I think it's so necessary. We have an influx of immigrants coming into this city or into this country every single day.
that's
People
right.
with ambition, people with great education, people or not so much educated, but like passion and drive and determination. And they find themselves in a culture where it's so difficult to navigate, right?
Yeah.
And so having platforms like Zaka to support that and to say, hey, here's a space where you can find X, Y, and Z. You can find people who look like you. You can find workshops. You can find podcasts. You can find all of this information to support your journey into not just transitioning, but also thriving in this
Yeah.
space, I'm all for that mission. I am
Mm.
all for that mission. So kudos to you guys as well for the work you
Oh,
do.
thank you, thank you. But I think we need to let the listeners know the truth now about this now, because
Tell me.
you're talking about the Zaka platform, but
Yes.
you're also going to be helping. You're partnering with Zaka on that
Yes.
platform with these workshops. Talk to us about these workshops. So, listeners, I just want to let you know the platform it has so many things to offer, and you can have workshops, especially from individuals like Linda. So, Linda, speak a little bit more about that partnership with Zaka. I'm glad. Thank you so much for saying those words.
Of course, yes. So, I'm hoping in the next few weeks or so to put together a few workshops for the Zaka platform. The first that I'm thinking about is about on networking. Networking is a huge part of corporate culture, something that I focus on in my coaching. A lot of immigrants struggle with networking in the United States, right? People, not just immigrants, by the way, a lot of human beings are uncomfortable with the term networking or just simply putting themselves out there to connect with other people. And so I want to make that easy. I want to debunk all of the myths that come with networking and beyond that, support people in moving from, being shy about approaching people or not having intentional goals about why they want to connect and approach people and helping them move from place A to place B. Building connections in the United States is critical to success, It's very important. It's certainly not something I was learning in Ghana, but here you need networks to succeed. You
Mm,
can't go anywhere on your own. So I really want to support people in learning how to be better at it. And also to think about building networks beyond the transaction, the get me a job or get me into this space. It's about
yeah,
relationship
yeah, yeah, yeah.
building.
Or
And I want
authentic,
to help people achieve that. So
authentic
that's the
relationships.
first immediate workshop I'm thinking about. I also want to work on something around financial literacy for, again, folks in this community. There are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to financial literacy. Again, back to the immigrant or young people or just people in general. We don't know how to save money. We don't know how to invest money. We don't know how to do a lot with money, right? A lot of people are uncomfortable with money conversations. People
Mm-hmm,
just,
mm-hmm,
they
mm-hmm.
just leave money and they just let it do its thing. And I just want to support people to be better at managing that so they can build wealth, so they can help grow their communities, etc. So those are the first two immediate workshops that I can think about right now, but more in the future, of course.
Well, thank you so much for expressing that. We're looking
Yes.
forward to those workshops that you're going to be providing. The platform is doing a phenomenal job right now with bringing in new members every single day. Not only from this podcast, people are hearing these journeys and stories, but people just, again, questioning and asking that, like, hey, look, I want more for myself. Where can I go get it? Right? And to have the guests contributed more of their time, like obviously this interview is life changing, right? But for you to even go another step further and partner with Zaka to make those workshops, we are forever grateful for that, and I'm looking forward to those workshops, and so are our listeners.
Of course.
Yeah. And any last words for our listeners right now? I know you've given a lot of gems. You've spoken a lot of facts. You hit us with some information, and I know that in the next couple of weeks we're all going to be checking in to see about these workshops. But any last words for our listeners?
I think one of the biggest things I would share with our listeners would be um, just have the audacity to live. I think that very often, because of whatever fears we create in our minds about people, situations, who we are, whether or not someone is better than we are, we limit ourselves from achieving greatness. And I just want to encourage people to be audacious, you know, just do the damn thing. Just do it.
Come
You
on.
know, just not that serious. You're not gonna die. You might get a little uncomfortable. It might feel a little uneasy, but guess what? People move on the next second and they forget that whatever happened happened anyway.
True.
And I live my life by that, you know. I don't limit myself because of what I think people will say or think. You know, I live audaciously and I encourage people to really embrace that and do that more because what's on the other side for you, you know, what you accomplish when you just lean in and trust yourself and your abilities and you push yourself no matter what other people say or no matter who's watching. When you push yourself, you achieve great things, and it's only you that can do that for yourself, no one else. So be audacious. Be audacious. That's my last
Okay.
word.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna listen to that as well too and do that myself.
Good, good, good.
I'm gonna continue on in that movement. But Linda, thank you, thank you again for taking the time to just be present with us and share your story and express us about is something that I admire about our conversation. Never once in your transitions did you ever say I hated it, right? You took on the challenge and you adapted to where you were at. And then you got to the next challenge. Not only did you go from one place to the next, you just kept on going. But in the mix of that, you learned 5 languages. In the mix of that, you gathered a lot of information about yourself. In the mix of that, so you took that might have been a negative to some people's eyes, like, oh, I'm moving again. Oh, I have to be in another community. I don't like it here. You found a way to find the positive in it. So I commend you for doing that because now our listeners could say, look, why am I complaining? Like you said, it's well, if it ain't gonna kill you, it's gonna work. Something's gonna happen. So kudos to that. And I want to let the listeners know if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Linda, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect and follow our feed Zaka wherever you listen to your podcasts.